My mother grabbed the microphone at my graduation, laughed, and told the entire auditorium, let's be honest, she didn't get here alone. I practically dragged her through college. Some guests laughed. Others exchanged confused looks. She kept going. Half those assignments? I was the one making sure they were done. My classmates stared at me. I froze in my seat. Then the dean slowly walked toward the stage, holding a folder with my name on it. My name is Seraphina Caldwell, and I'm 36 years old. I grew up in a small town in eastern Pennsylvania where everybody knew everybody, and every family had its own scoreboard. In my family, the scoreboard always favored my older sister, Gwendolyn. She was the one they praised at every dinner table, the one whose report cards got pinned to the refrigerator, the one my aunts called the future success story. I was the other one. The quiet one. The practical one who preferred solving problems over chasing attention. While Gwendolyn collected compliments, I collected observations. I watched how things worked. I took apart instructions and rewrote them in my head so they made more sense. That habit followed me into adulthood and eventually became my career. I went into technical documentation and systems writing. My job was to translate complex software processes into clear, simple guides that real people could actually follow. It doesn't sound glamorous. My family made sure I knew that. My mother would tilt her head at holiday gatherings and say, "So you write boring instructions for a living?" Then she'd laugh and look around the room for agreement. She always got it. Nobody in my family understood what I did, and nobody tried to. But here's what they also didn't understand. I worked full-time while attending school part-time. I paid most of my tuition myself. I came home from 8-hour shifts and studied until 2 in the morning. I ate ramen and cold sandwiches at my desk because I couldn't afford the time or the money for anything else. My mother rarely acknowledged any of this effort. Instead, she told relatives she had to push Seraphina through school. She made it sound like I was a reluctant student being shoved toward a degree I didn't care about. That wasn't true. Not even close. But I stopped correcting people a long time ago. Arguing with my family never changed their minds. It only gave them more fuel. So I stopped feeding the fire and quietly focused on building stability and independence, brick by brick, paper by paper, late night by late night. Graduation day was supposed to be my personal milestone. Not a party. Not a spectacle. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I had survived the grind and come out the other side with something real. When my mother said she planned to attend the ceremony, a knot formed in my stomach. Family gatherings always turned into competitions for attention, and I had a feeling this one would be no different. What I didn't expect was how far she would go. There was one thing that gave me a small sense of comfort heading into that day. A few faculty members had recently shown interest in some of my academic projects. One professor in particular had asked me detailed questions about my writing. It felt good to be seen by someone who understood the work. I wasn't flashy or loud. I didn't demand attention. But I had something my family never noticed. Persistence. If you grew up feeling overlooked or underestimated in your own family, I think you'll understand this story. Some people spend years working quietly in the background while others step into the spotlight and take a bow they didn't earn. If you've ever been the one no one expected much from, only to surprise everyone including yourself, then this channel is for you. Subscribe if you enjoy stories about resilience and standing up for yourself. And let me ask you something. Has anyone ever taken credit for something you worked hard to accomplish? If so, I want to hear about it. Drop your experience in the comments and hit that like button so more people can find stories like this one. Now, let's go back to that graduation stage, because what happened next shocked everyone. The ceremony started the way most graduations do. Rows of folding chairs filled with students in caps and gowns. Families packed into the bleachers with balloons and flowers and phones held up to record every moment. The air smelled like floor polish and fresh bouquets. There was music playing softly from the speakers near the stage. It all felt official. It felt earned. I sat in my assigned row near the middle and tried to enjoy it. I really did. But even before the first name was called, I could hear my mother's voice cutting through the crowd noise behind me. She was sitting with my aunt and 2 of my cousins, and she wasn't whispering. She was telling them, loud enough for the rows around her to hear, how she had to keep Seraphina focused through college. She said it like I was a child who couldn't sit still in class. "You know how she is," she said. If I hadn't stayed on top of her, she would have quit halfway through. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes forward and pressed my hands flat against my knees. My palms were damp. The names started rolling. One by one, students walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, and posed for photos. When my row stood up and started moving toward the aisle, my heart beat harder. Not from excitement. From dread. I knew my mother. I knew what she was capable of when she had an audience. When the announcer called my name, applause rose across the auditorium. It was warm and genuine. I stood up, walked toward the stage, and for about 4 seconds, I felt proud. Then I saw movement to my left. My mother was out of her seat. She was walking toward the stage steps with a wide smile on her face, waving at the crowd like she had been invited. Before anyone could stop her, she stepped onto the platform and reached for the microphone on the podium. "Excuse me," she said, laughing lightly. "I just want to say something as a proud parent." The announcer hesitated and then stepped aside, probably assuming it was a brief, heartfelt moment. It wasn't. My mother turned to the crowd and said, "I helped this girl organize every single assignment. I made sure she stayed disciplined. I checked on her grades. I called her professors." None of that was true. She had never called a single professor. She didn't even know what program I was in until the year before. Some guests laughed awkwardly. A few faculty members in the front row exchanged uncomfortable looks. I could see them shifting in their seats. My classmates turned to look at me. I was standing at the edge of the stage, frozen, my diploma folder in my hand, my face burning. She kept going. "Honestly," she said, holding the microphone like she was giving a toast at a wedding, "this diploma belongs to both of us." The auditorium went quiet for a moment, then scattered, uncertain applause. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The dean, a tall man with silver hair and reading glasses, stood up slowly from his seat on the stage. He walked calmly toward my mother and gently asked her to return to her seat. His voice was polite but firm. She laughed again, waved to the crowd, and stepped down like she had just delivered a standing ovation performance. As she passed me, she squeezed my arm and whispered, "You're welcome." The dean returned to the podium. He adjusted the microphone and paused for a moment. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Before we continue," he said, "I want to mention that I recently reviewed Ms. Caldwell's academic portfolio." He looked directly at me, and I discovered something quite remarkable. After the ceremony ended, the damage had already spread. My mother's little speech became the main topic at the family gathering that evening. Relatives repeated her claims like they were confirmed facts. "Your mom really held your hand through college, huh?" my uncle said while loading his plate with potato salad. He said it casually, like it was just friendly conversation. It wasn't. My cousin Denise was worse. She leaned across the table and said, "I bet half those papers were written by your mom anyway. She always was the smart one in the family." She laughed and elbowed my aunt. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said, "Actually, Seraphina worked full-time and put herself through school." Nobody mentioned the late nights or the tuition payments or the years of silent effort. They just accepted my mother's version because it was louder and it came first. That was the first betrayal. The public rewriting of my story by the people who were supposed to know me best. The second betrayal came 3 days later. I was scrolling through my phone during my lunch break when I saw it. My mother had posted a long message on social media with a photo from the graduation. In the photo, she was standing next to me on the stage, beaming. The caption read, "So proud of my baby girl." Guiding her through every difficult class wasn't easy, but we did it together. This degree belongs to both of us. The comments underneath were filled with praise. "What an amazing mother. She's so lucky to have you." Not every parent goes that far. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She hadn't helped me through a single class. She didn't know what technical documentation meant. She once asked me if I was still doing that typing thing when I told her I had finished a major certification project. But online, She was the devoted mother who sacrificed everything to get her daughter across the finish line. And people believed it. Family members shared the post. Friends of hers commented with heart emojis. The story about my education was being rewritten in real time, and I was watching it happen from the outside. The third betrayal came a week later when my mother called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was sweet, which always meant she wanted something. "Seraphina, honey, I think it would be really nice if you posted something online thanking me for everything I did during your college years." I held the phone away from my ear for a second and took a breath. "Mom, you didn't help me with college." "That's not the point," she said quickly. "The point is it would make the family look supportive. It would make us look good." "It would make you look good," I said. There was a pause. Then her voice changed. It got colder. Sharper. "You know what your problem is? You've always been embarrassed by this family. You think you're better than us because you got some piece of paper." "I'm not embarrassed," I said. "I just don't want to lie." She hung up. Within an hour, my aunt called to tell me my mother was crying and that I should apologize. My cousin texted me saying I was being difficult as usual. Another cousin posted a vague comment online about ungrateful children who forget where they came from. I sat in my apartment that night staring at the ceiling. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only company I had. I realized something clearly in that silence. The story of my achievements was being rewritten publicly. My mother wasn't just taking credit. She was building a version of events where she was the hero and I was the ungrateful daughter who couldn't succeed without her. If I fought back loudly, I would become the villain. If I stayed quiet, the lie would become the accepted truth. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. Not like this. I would wait. Because I had learned something important over the years. The truth doesn't need volume. It needs timing. What they didn't know is that my writing had already reached far beyond my classes. For years, quietly and without telling a single family member, I had been running an anonymous online technical training platform. It started small. I created a few tutorials about software documentation processes, the kind of clear, step-by-step guides that my courses trained me to write. I posted them under a pen name on a simple website I built myself. At first, only a handful of people visited. But the content was useful, genuinely useful, and word spread. Within 2 years, companies started licensing my tutorials to train their employees. Tech firms, healthcare organizations, logistics companies. They needed clear instructional material, and mine was consistently rated among the best available. The platform grew steadily. It generated significant income. More than my full-time job, actually. I reinvested most of it back into the site, improving the interface, adding video components, hiring a freelance editor to help with quality control. But I never revealed my identity. Not to anyone outside a very small circle. I didn't want my family involved. I didn't want my mother showing up at my door claiming she inspired the whole thing. I didn't want cousins asking for money or aunts making comments about how I should share my success. Independence meant privacy, and privacy meant peace. The anonymity worked perfectly until one afternoon when Professor Celestine Harrow pulled me aside after a seminar. She had a printed page in her hand. It was one of my tutorials from the platform. "I've been using resources from this site for my own coursework recommendations," she said calmly. And I couldn't help noticing something. "The writing style is remarkably similar to yours." I didn't confirm or deny it. I just looked at her. She smiled. "Your phrasing patterns, your paragraph structures, even the way you organize procedural steps. It's distinctive, Seraphina." She had figured it out. Within a few weeks, she brought it to the attention of the dean. He reviewed the site himself and realized that the creator of a platform used by dozens of companies was one of their own students. He was impressed. More than impressed. He started asking questions about a potential collaboration with the university. I had no idea at the time how significant that conversation would become. All I knew was that the work I had been doing in silence was beginning to surface. And the people who called my writing useless had no idea how valuable those words had become. Professor Celestine Harrow was the first person in academia who ever made me feel like my work mattered. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm, measured way of speaking that made you listen carefully to every word. She had been teaching in the technical communications program for over 15 years, and she had a reputation for being honest, sometimes painfully so. But she was also deeply supportive of students who showed discipline and initiative. She became my mentor during my final year. She didn't give praise easily, but when she did, it meant something. After she discovered my platform, she didn't expose me or pressure me to go public. Instead, she encouraged me to keep developing it. She told me to think about scale, about long-term partnerships, about what the platform could become if I treated it like a business rather than a side project. After the graduation incident, I called her. I told her everything. The microphone grab, the social media posts, the family pressure. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said something I've never forgotten. "Seraphina, don't react emotionally. That's what they expect. The truth doesn't need a stage. It reveals itself through patience." She told me to stay focused. She told me not to post anything online. She told me not to argue with relatives. She said the moment would come when the facts would speak louder than any speech my mother could give. Meanwhile, my mother continued her campaign. She told more relatives. She told neighbors. She told her coworkers. The story grew with each retelling. In one version, she had edited my papers. In another, she had attended meetings with my professors. In yet another, she had helped me choose my major. None of it was true. But the narrative spread through the family like water soaking into dry ground. It became the accepted version of events. Then Celestine called me with news. The university was hosting an alumni networking reception the following month. Faculty, graduates, and business leaders would attend. The dean planned to make a special announcement during the event. She told me I needed to be there. "Trust the process," she said. "And wear something nice." The reception was held in the university's main conference hall on a cool Friday evening in October. The room smelled like fresh coffee and catered food. Round tables were set with white cloths and small floral centerpieces. Screens lined the front wall near a podium. Business leaders in tailored suits mingled with faculty in blazers and graduates still glowing from the newness of their degrees. I arrived early and found a seat near the side of the room. I wore a navy blue dress I had bought the week before. My hands were steady, but my stomach was not. I hadn't told my mother about the event, but somehow she found out. She walked in 20 minutes after I did, wearing a bright red jacket and a confident smile. She spotted a group of well-dressed guests near the refreshment table and immediately introduced herself. "I'm Seraphina's mother," she announced proudly. "I helped her get through college. It wasn't easy, but here we are." The guests smiled politely. One woman nodded and said, "That's lovely." My mother beamed. She had her audience. The dean took the podium about an hour into the event. He welcomed everyone, thanked the sponsors, and then shifted his tone. He said the university had recently become aware of a professional training platform that was being used by companies across multiple industries. The screens behind him lit up. Screenshots of tutorials appeared. Clean, precise instructional pages with diagrams and step-by-step guides. I recognized every single one of them. They were mine. The dean explained that the platform had been quietly growing for years. He described how it had become a trusted resource for corporate training departments. He talked about its clarity, its structure, and its effectiveness. Then he paused and looked out at the audience. "What makes this story remarkable," he said, "is that the creator of this platform is one of our newest graduates." He clicked to the next slide. My name appeared on the screen in large letters. Seraphina Caldwell. The room stirred. People turned to look at me. I stood slowly. The dean smiled and invited me to the front. I walked to the podium on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. He shook my hand and announced that the university was entering a formal partnership with me to develop new professional training resources based on my platform's model. The applause was warm and genuine. Business leaders nodded with interest. Faculty members clapped firmly. Then I heard my mother's voice from the back of the room. "I helped write some of that material," she called out. The room went quiet. Heads turned toward her. She stood near the refreshment table with her chin raised, her red jacket bright under the lights. "I was involved in her work from the beginning," she said. "She wouldn't have gotten this far without me." Before I could respond, Professor Celestine Harrow stood from her seat. She walked to the podium calmly and asked the dean for a moment. He nodded. Celestine opened a folder she had been carrying all evening. She presented a clear timeline of my platform's development, including server records, publishing dates, licensing agreements, and correspondence with companies. Every document pointed to a single author. Me. She also showed records of my coursework submissions, my independent projects, and my employment history during college. The evidence was thorough, precise, and undeniable. She placed the folder on the podium and returned to her seat without a single dramatic word. I turned to face my mother. The room was completely still. I could hear someone's shoe shift on the tile floor. "Mom," I said. My voice was steady. Clear. "You didn't build my work. You didn't build my career. I did." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She looked around the room for support, for someone to agree with her, for a laugh or a nod. She found nothing. Just silence and the quiet hum of the projector above. In the weeks that followed, several companies reached out to me directly. They had been at the reception or heard about it through industry contacts. Partnership offers came in steadily. Consulting requests. Licensing deals. My platform expanded rapidly once my identity became public. Having a university endorsement behind it gave the work a new level of credibility. People who had been using my tutorials for years finally had a name to attach to the content, and many of them sent messages expressing genuine respect for what I had built. Relatives who once dismissed my career now attempted to reconnect. My cousin Denise sent me a message saying she always knew I was talented. My uncle called and said he was proud of me, using almost the exact same tone he used to mock my work at family dinners. I kept polite distance from all of them. I didn't slam doors or burn bridges. But I recognized something important. Respect that only appears after success is not really respect. It's convenience. My mother never brought up the graduation moment again. She didn't apologize. She didn't acknowledge what happened at the reception. She simply stopped talking about my career entirely, as if the whole subject had been quietly erased from her memory. I didn't push her. Some silences say more than words ever could. When I look back on everything that happened, I realize the most satisfying part wasn't proving anyone wrong. It wasn't the applause at the reception or the business offers or the public recognition. It was the quiet knowledge that I had built something meaningful entirely on my own. No help. No shortcuts. No borrowed credit. Just persistence, patience, and the stubborn belief that the work would eventually speak for itself. And it did. If you've ever had someone try to claim your achievements as their own, I want you to know that your effort belongs to you. Nobody else. I understand how painful it can be when the people closest to you dismiss what you've done or twist the story to make themselves the hero. That pain is real, and you don't have to pretend it isn't. But here's what I've learned. Dedication doesn't transfer. The person who did the work is the person who earned the result. No speech, no social media post, and no family narrative can change that. If you've experienced someone taking credit for your accomplishments, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about standing up for yourself and reclaiming your voice. And if this story resonated with you, click share to help it reach others who need it.